Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again from Film Fanatic headquarters here in the great city of Northport, Maine. Hope everyone's doing good. It is Wednesday at 8:55. So, yeah, hope everyone's doing good. I want to thank everybody again for their support. If you like these videos, please like and subscribe. It's great. The numbers have been growing a little bit each and every day, and I love the comments. People have been commenting more frequently on the videos, and it's been really cool. And again, like I've said in previous videos, always surprised but super stoked and always excited by the videos that I do put on this channel. I try to mix things up with other genres and other styles of filmmaking, or a varied scope, if you want to call it that, of different movies and different styles. And so, but the thing that I'm always really impressed with, and that fires me up and makes me really excited, is the movies that I tend to do most of the time on this channel. To make up the majority of the videos are all of the weird and unusual exploitation movies that I really love, and I just can't get enough of them. And those always seem to get the biggest hits, and so it's really awesome, and that really gives me even more fuel and passion to kind of keep doing this. So I really appreciate that, and that and it's a cool thing to think that my channel is relatively small, is a small time little show, and it's not like a this grand thing right now. But for me, it's a great outlet. It's a whole lot of fun with what I'm working with, and in the confines of what I'm trying to do with the show. I feel like I'm learning more and more about different facets of it, on how to keep things pretty focused, how to put together better quality videos. So really excited. So when I see a lot of these videos and movies that I cover, particularly the ones I really love the most, that there are actually people out there that actually watch this stuff. It's it's super cool, and it's super cool, and it just is always surprising to me. Well, actually, a few months ago, I came across this YouTube channel, and this guy had the the founders of a few of these companies. I saw a show with the guys, the CEOs, if you want to call them that, the CEOs of like Severin, um, and a few other companies. And all of these companies, like Severin, Blue Underground, Mondo Macabre, there's a whole bunch of them. What they do is they specialize in putting out all of these exploitation movies, horror exploitation movies, sci-fi exploitation movies. Uh, all the movies tend to come out, or are originally from like the 70s, 80s, and lots of giallo films, totally underground, kind of films. And so I was watching this one podcast, and one of the guys was saying how he kind of felt the that well might run dry in about 5 years, meaning that they're doing well. All these companies are doing pretty well in it. There's an audience, but in comparison to, people who, want to go to, say, Walmart and buy the latest Avengers movie, or what have you, it's quite a bit smaller, which is not a surprise because it's more of a cult kind of following, like an underground circuit. But he felt that is still strong, and has a lot of merit, and there's profits to be made. But he felt that it might not be able to sustain itself, and he predicted, this one guy, and I believe he was one of the founders of Severn, which is one of the best companies around. he more or less predicted that. He felt that this whole kind of craze that's been going on for I don't know, maybe 5 to 10 years, with all these reissues of all these exploitation movies, he kind of felt that it could just go away within 5 years because of the ever changing market and everything. Which I don't know. It was sad to hear that, but then I also feel like I don't know. I don't know if that would actually happen. I think people are gonna, it's a smaller percentage or a smaller percentage of the population that obviously loves films that are in that realm. But they're what I find, and people that I've come in contact with that love these films, they're hardcore. Like they are, they're all about it. They really are passionate about it, and they're really, into that whole tactile thing of like seeing the artwork, holding the movie in their hand, and having holding, buying movies, holding them in their hands, having that tactile experience, and investing money in 4K TVs, or good surround sound systems for their Blu-ray player, and they're generally into that experience. And then so it's hard to those people that are of that persuasion. It's hard to believe that because they're so fired up and excited by these films, it's hard to believe that one day they'll just wake up and they'll be like, you know what, I'm not into it anymore. Or I'm just kind of move on to I'm gonna move on to something else. No, I think it's we're in it for life, and that's how I am too. I've always loved these films, and a lot of these films I grew up watching, and then ever since I came across a few years ago of all of these movies being reissued, with these just amazing packages, it's just increased my desire to buy more and more of these films and to become a real collector too. And then you have percentage. I think there's definitely a percentage of, I think even within that kind of cult audience that buys a lot of these films, like myself, what I see too, and I think it's a thing. I think there's two fractions of that, which I think is kind of interesting. But I think you have some people on one side of the fence that are they're avid collectors, and they buy movies and they support a lot of these companies. But you have, I think, percentage of some of these folks that are doing it for more of just a collector's, like a collector's, or boutique kind of mentality, where because it's sought out, it's really rare. It can be pretty expensive. They're into collecting things as a hobby, so a lot of the times I've come across people who buy a lot of these films, and they basically treat it almost like a painting, or a museum piece that they acquire, and they more or less frame it and put it away or stick it away, and then they keep it in the package, and it's kind of just there for their collection. People who collect rare books. I mean, there's so many things that people do as far as like collecting things. I even got into this weird collector thing of where I started collecting these various kinds of pens, and I started this little weird collection where I started collecting these pens. But I think so. You have the collector mentality where people are purely buying the things and treating them like they're an art piece. But then you have people who buy them, obviously buy all the movies, but then they're actually watching them all the time, and it's not like, you know, well, I'm cool because I have the money and I'm going to just buy this rare thing, and it's kind of fun. But I actually want to immerse myself and live in the world and actually watch the films that I buy. I'm definitely more in that camp. It's like, I've come across a few people who do buy movies, but they'll uh, you know, buy them in bulk on Blu-ray or DVD or 4K, and they buy so many and they just kind of collect them. And a lot of times they don't even see the movies. There's a few guys out there that do that, but they also watch them. And I feel like that's how I am too. I'm just like I want to have that experience. So I'm gonna buy them, and and live with them and breathe with them. One of the things that I frequently do is like I'll buy. It's been I don't know. It was around Christmas time, uh, Christmas vacation, a little bit after Christmas, where that was my last trip to where I bought some movies. So it's been I don't know. It's been about 3 weeks, a little shy of a month. And then before that, I was making more frequent trips to buy movies. So right now, I'm trying to take a little break from spending any money on movies. So what I'm doing now is, and again, the prices are really fantastic. But what I'm doing now, what I tend to do is I'll buy a group of movies, buy a new batch of movies. Obviously check them all out, watch them. But then you know, certain movies, and I've lucked out because a lot of the films I've bought have been really fantastic. A lot of movies I saw as a kid, but then it's moved into buying lots of movies I've never seen before. And I've really lucked out as far as my purchases go. I haven't really gotten any films that I thought were not so good. It's been really awesome in that department. So what I do is after I've acquired all these movies, I'll like sit with them and I'll watch them multiple times. I'll check out this one. I've seen one or two films I've only seen maybe once or twice since I've bought it, or once. So I'll check that out, watch it again, and I'll try to live in that world and just kind of immerse myself with those groups of films and watch them every day. And it's super cool, super fun because I think of other films that I grew up watching. Two examples would be like say Blade Runner or Alien. Those films I've seen so many times, probably more than any other films in my entire you know history of loving film. Uh, and I've seen those so many times in so many different formats. So I try to keep that kind of thing with when I buy these new purchases, and especially if I'm really excited about them. I like to live with them and buy them and check them out, and I have a lot of my collection's pretty good, and there's a lot of variety within the films I've been buying, so it's really nice. And so I like to live and breathe into it for a while, and then over time when I'm kind of like starting to crave, okay, maybe I'm gonna get some more movies or some new ones, then I'll do that. But I try to space it out so I can like have the time to actually like sit with the films and enjoy them and learn about them and just live with them. So it's a really cool and fun process. So I do that. I do that pretty much all the time. One of the coolest things that's been happening, which has been pretty fun, with people liking this page, but there's a little group of friends that I have, and then people that I know in town, like some acquaintances, but I kind of consider them all friends and stuff too, because I see them around, at music events or just in general. They, like it happened to me last night. I went to a rehearsal and I ran into somebody I play music with, a great friend, Rick, and he was saying how he watches this channel all the time, and he tries to make it a point to watch all the videos. And I was like, that's really cool, like that's awesome. And I've run into a couple other people that follow it that I know, and that they like watch the videos sometimes daily, or they watch it every week and they check out a new video, or they and they comment on stuff. And I was like, that's really cool, like that's a good feeling that like people actually care about some of the crap I'm talking about. And it's stuff that you know I really love. I take seriously, but then I realize it's like when I look at the actual content of the stuff I have and the actual movies, they're pretty silly. So I think it's pretty awesome that's a thing. Um, Sometimes I've had people say, or just in general on YouTube, got different reviewers and things. They talk about, well, on one hand, like the state of films, but they generally think that a lot of films, which I think is true overall in a lot of ways, but they generally think a lot of the newer films that are out are very serious, like very very serious. There's no like, um, whether it's a drama or even an action movie or horror film, um, but they're really. I was checking out some newer releases, and they were more in the drama world, at Opera House Video last week, and I didn't rent them, but the thing that everything, or the way all the films have come across that I've been checking out, through trailers and even some films I've watched, is that they're generally like really, really serious, and that they're very like, you know, focused on a very specific thing or things, but they're very, very serious. The whole tone, and that everything's meant to be taken kind of literally, and that it's like pretty heavy, and they deal with a lot of great subjects, and a lot of uh, heavy subjects. And I love films like that are serious. But one thing I noticed with all of these exploitation movies that I buy, even the ones that like, even the movie I did last yesterday, which is on Castle of the Creeping Flesh, which is one of my all-time favorite exploitation movies. I did a show on that film yesterday, and it's easily one of the most disturbing films I've ever seen. But at the same time, it's got this aspect of it where it doesn't take itself seriously at all, and it's very campy. It's like it's like a pulpy fantasy land, and it's super cheesy, but it has this element. Even though that I feel like Castle of the Creeping Flesh is kind of an extreme version of it to a degree, where it's very it's very intense, and it's like I said, it's at times it's shocking, but there's still this thing around it where it doesn't quite take itself so seriously. Like it has this fun aspect, and I noticed like with all of the films that I watch that are in this kind of genre or more or less in this style, you know, even if they're like say kind of brutal films around violence, or they're like in the slasher realm or whatnot, there's still some kind of aspect to all the films of where there's a little bit of this like tongue in cheek kind of thing going on, and it's not. It's still entertaining, and it doesn't take they don't take themselves all that serious. And I don't really see that in a lot of films these days. I will say that there's a lot of great films that come out. There has been a tremendous amount of films that have come out in the last year or two, and really great quality films. But their tone of the films, like they're very serious, and they're very heavy, and kind of in your face. But that's one thing I noticed with the whole like exploitation world, is that even though you'll have things in those films that are very extreme and harsh and brutal, even in those extreme examples, there's this level of campiness and silliness to it that it's almost oddly lighthearted. So you're never really uh, you know it's never so heavy-handed, and I think that's one of the attractions for me too, is that it gives it more of a sense of pure escapism. So it's very cool. So today's movie is a movie that I really, really love. I've talked about this wonderful director many times, and that is Herschel Gordon Lewis. He's one of my favorite directors. I discovered him not all that long ago, like maybe about probably 3 or 4 years ago. And he's known as the director, uh, basically, he's the godfather of gore. He pretty much, I would say, he's definitely the guy. He's an American director. He was the guy, the first director that used practical effects and gore in horror films. And you're going back to his career started in the late 50s, but in the 60s he started making horror films, most notably Blood Feast. And those films, and just in general his body of work, he was definitely, I think, if you look at it from a like an historical perspective, and how where did where did that start, like where was that point of where who was that filmmaker, or what was that film, where it showed the first, where you saw for the first time somebody being, brutally killed, or there was lots of gore, or somebody getting their head cut off, or and there was a use of practical effects, and where did that start? And I've spent a lot of time trying to trace that back, because it's something I love. And again, it's like I've talked about this before, but the first movie I saw that I considered to be a slasher film, and it still very much is, but it was the first movie I saw as a kid that where it was like really gory and but fun, and but it was the first time that I saw like people kind of being killed on screen, and that was the first Friday the 13th, directed by Sean Cunningham. And as I got older, I realized like and I got more and more, and that was the introduction to me as far as like horror or the slasher franchise. And that was the first movie I ever saw as a kid where there was practical effects and there was like gruesome kills in the movie. And as I've gotten older, I was always like, wow, I wonder, was this the first movie that did that? Was Sean Cunningham the first director to introduce those kinds of things on the screen? And over the years, I've like, bought a lot of movies, checked out a lot of movies, and done some research. And it's been an interesting journey because, up to like, a few years ago, I started to really get into a lot of the Italian directors, Lucio Fulci, Bruno Mattei, um, Dario Gento. There's so many great directors, and I noticed like, and those are also films that I grew up watching as a kid. And I've been buying them, and I've noticed, wow, okay, these movies predated Friday the 13th, for example. So I'm like, oh, these guys were were doing these kinds of things in films before. They were creating these gore fests, these very really gory, violent movies that used a heavy reliance on all of these practical effects. So, and I started to think, okay, that's where, so the Italians were the godfathers of that style of horror, and that's where it started. They were the first ones to kind of start the slasher thing. And then when I discovered Herschel Gordon Lewis quite a few years later, and I had never seen any of his movies growing up, I didn't know anything about him, and I randomly came across one of his movies that I watched in this box set that I got that was all of these exploitation movies. And I couldn't believe it. I was just like, wait, this guy, he was making movies in the 60s, even in the 50s. And I'm like, what? And then that's when I realized, wow, this stuff even goes back further. And then I started buying a lot of his films, and I have most of his films now on Blu-ray. And he's become one of my favorite directors. I mean, he's pretty wacky, and even calling him a director is, I don't know, kind of questionable, but he's just great and super fun. And but then I realized, well, no, wait, going back even further, he actually predated what the Italians were doing and what a lot of the European exploitation directors were doing. So, it was like a real cool revelation. Being a fan of horror, it was like, oh wait, okay, so this guy was actually doing, and then I traced the lineage of where these things came, and it just blew my mind that you know and I acquired a lot of Herschel Gordon Lewis movies. I've been just blown away by, wow, I can't believe this movie was doing this kind of thing, at that time. And Wizard of Gore is one of those. It's definitely one of those examples. Like, this came out in 1970. Like, it's crazy. So you think of, like, say, Friday the 13th, which came out in, was it 79 or 80? So this like is like 10 or 11 years uh, before Friday the 13th, maybe even more actually. And it's crazy to think that, like, that this movie what came out and was doing this. And this movie's like super super gory. Like, it's super cheesy, but it's like super gory. There's like disembowelments, and there's like heads being cut off. There's limbs being torn off. But again, it's super funny, it's super campy, and it's really bad at the same time. But I was just like blown away by, like, well, like this, for example, and even further back, Blood Feast. That Herschel Gordon Lewis was doing the stuff even before that. So super cool. I love that's one of my favorite things to do. Again, like, this movie came out in 1970. the basic premise of it is it's centered around an insane magician who uses hypnotism to butcher his audience members gullible enough to participate in the show. Uh, and it's just, and it stars Ray Sager. Um, and this transfer of this movie on Blu-ray is just like incredible. The quality of it, and that's one of the things about these packages is the quality of these Blu-rays. It's just amazing. Like the artwork is just amazing. I mean, it's just crazy, and they're really cheap. I got this really cheap. Um, it's got this really great documentary and interview with Stephen Thrower. Stephen Thrower is a really well renowned author, um, and he covers all things in the exploitation world. He's kind of a specialist, and he's awesome. He does all of these great. He's written a bunch of books out. One of the biggest things he did was he wrote a book. Like, I think it's an autobiography on Jess Franco. You know, one of the greatest exploitation directors ever. He did a biography with him, and he's put out a whole bunch of books on all things exploitation. He's a real specialist, but he gives a lot of. I noticed on a lot of the movies I have, he's on almost every one, doing a commentary or being interviewed about a particular director, and the guy is just super interesting, and uh, just just uh, just awesome. And it's like going to a film class when you listen to him. Um, just fabulous. And every time I buy a disc or buy a movie and I notice that he's on it, or if I'm looking, like say I'm looking through the aisles for a movie and I see that Stephen Brower is going to be on it, sometimes that's a deciding factor for me to buy movies, particularly if it's a movie I haven't seen, because I really I really believe he's like probably the most knowledgeable guy around things, around anything in the exploitation world. But he's got really great taste. He's got all such a variety of things he's into. But I see if he's talking about a film that I like, say it's a movie I haven't seen, and if he's talking about a movie and he's doing a show on it and he's excited by it, chances are that movie's probably really good. And every time I've done that, that is usually spot on. It's fantastic. One of the awesome things too on here, one of the best things on here, probably the best thing on this disc, is the interview with Ray Sager, who plays the lead. He plays the magician Montag, um, or Montag the Magnificent, who is like the stage magician, and that's who the whole film is centered on. And he's just an amazing, like, he's just got such a great presence on the screen. There's a really awesome interview with him on here, and he did this film when he was really young, so he's still pretty young. And watching it, I didn't realize, when he took on the role of Montag the Magnificent, which is kind of like regarded in this, in the exploitation world, as kind of this iconic role. He really has this amazing presence, and he's very I don't know, very alluring. He's very seductive. But the interview with him is awesome. Like, I didn't realize the history he's had with Herschel Gordon Lewis, and he's worked in a lot of his films, and the history behind how he got this role as Montag the Magnificent, where he was working in the effects, working on the technical side of certain films, and Herschel Gordon Lewis was in the midst of shooting this film, The Wizard of Gore, but something happened with his lead, the guy who was going to play Montag the Magnificent. They had some kind of falling out, and he ended up leaving the set. And Ray Sayer was there, happened to be on the set, and Ray Sager was there on set, and Herschel Gordon Lewis asked him, "Hey, do you want to be in this role?" And it was like within a few minutes he decided to ask Ray Sager to do it, and then he was cast right then and there, as Montag, the Magnificent, and just wild. And then he went on to to star in this movie, and this was one of Herschel Gordon Lewis has quite a few movies under his belt, and this was one of his biggest commercial movies. This was during the time of Grindhouse, the Grindhouse cinema craze. Drive-in movie theaters, and for what it was, some directors, and particularly Herschel Gordon Lewis, they made a lot of money doing a lot of these films, and so it was a huge market for a while, even commercially to a degree. And this was one of his biggest films. He made a lot of movies. This and Blood Feast, I believe, was the two biggest films of his career. But I just love this movie. It's so pulpy. The music is just so great. It's so cheesy and terrible, but I love the whole like supernatural element to it. It's got this like really deranged kind of aesthetic behind it. There's like these scenes in it that are really deranged and just crazy, but it's fun and it's like really funny too. It's kind of like a comedy. Um, it's super sleazy. It's super low budget, and it's beautifully shot. Like I just think the cinematography, even on some ways, like you could look at this movie at face value and be like, it's kind of a piece of crap. But again, it's one of those cliche things that it's so bad it's good, and I think that's such a true thing to say for a lot of things in art or what we consider to be art. I think The Wizard of Gore is definitely that, and in general, Herschel Gordon Lewis as a director, um, just tremendous. I've done a few things on him before. I did Blood Feast. Um, Dave Friedman, who was the producer on a lot of the Herschel Gordon Lewis movies, I did one of his films that he wrote actually called She Freak, which is just such an awesome movie. I did a show on that. Pretty similar in styles, but very different in a lot of ways. But definitely like this totally low budget Grindhouse movie. And again, it's like going to a party. Like they're just so damn fun. And in a lot of ways, I will say, even though I love a lot of new films, and there's a lot of great films that have come out just within last year alone, just 2022 alone, but they don't have that kind of thing about them of where they're just fun. They're all like pretty heavy. They're pretty serious. Like they're not. And I know it's you got to be appropriate to like the kind of the material that the film is what the story is about, and and the aesthetics behind it, what the story is, and blah blah blah. But still, in the world of exploitation, there's always this level of campiness and silliness and fun, and to a degree, or definitely to a degree, uh, it's puts you in that state of pure escapism. And that's at the end of the day, it's why people love movies or go to the theater, is to take you out of the mundane, and so you can't you can't you know you can't replace that, I don't think so. But just an amazing movie. I have Oh, and the other film I did do was 2000 Maniacs by Herschel Gordon Lewis, and that was a film that was the first movie of his I ever seen. That was my introduction to his movies, and I was just like, "What?" I remember watching that movie for the first time, and I'm like, "This movie is such a piece of trash, but it's so deranged and kind of disturbing, and it's so like just punk rock. It's so nasty." It had all those elements, and I'm like, "This is great." But then, but the end of it, I was just like, "This movie is amazing." Like, who is this guy, Herschel Gordon Lewis? Who the hell is this guy? But that was the first movie I saw, and ever since then, I have I pretty much have all of his movies. The other thing that is so awesome, this is Arrow put out all of his movies. Arrow's a really good company, but I'm not familiar with. They've done a lot of other exploitation movies, but I'm not all that familiar. I don't think I have a whole lot of Arrow products. I have most, like I said, I have most of Herschel Gordon Lewis's movies now on Blu-ray. Um, and the editions that they put out for these films is just amazing, like amazing. And they always come with a great package of special features, which is just awesome. Great interviews, and um, the other thing that's so awesome is they always put two movies on each disc. Uh, so each disc is doubled up, so you have two movies. And there's another film of his which I can't remember, which I'm gonna watch tonight. That's on this disc too, and so you get such a bang for your buck when you buy a lot of these movies, and the quality is just great. I mean, to think that these movies that are just so, um, you know, uh, so raw get this kind of treatment where they put them on Blu-ray is just like insane. And they're all like restored and remastered from like the original film, so the quality is like amazing. Like it's ridiculous, and the sound gets remastered, and it's just it's wild. Um, but I did a show on 2000 Maniacs, and I'll be doing more shows of his because I have quite a few of his other films that I want to get to. But Herschel Lewis, he's the man. He's definitely one of my favorite directors. I kind of can't ever get enough of his stuff, and so stay tuned for more shows. And but I think this would be, if you're a fan of Gore. I mean, probably Blood Feast. My favorite Herschel Gordon Lewis movie is probably Blood Feast, but I really love this movie too, and 2000 Maniacs. Those three films are probably my favorite. Blood Feast is probably my favorite. But if you're in the mood for like, you know, just you know, a trip of a movie, I highly recommend any of them. But this one is pretty over the top as far as the violence goes and the gore. But it's so entertaining. I remember last year I had a friend who came over, and we watched uh, Blood Feast, and she had never heard of Herschel Gordon Lewis before, and definitely never seen that movie. And she was just, I remember we were watching it together, and she was just like, what? And but she loved it. She thought by the end of it, she was like, I want to see more. And I'm like, that's exactly the experience that I have around his films, and it's just great. So before I sign off here, too, there's a couple more things coming up. On Saturday, I'm going to be doing an interview with this woman, Kaylee, who is the manager of Flagship Cinema that's located in Thomaston. And Flagship Cinema is really the only, I guess you could call it like franchise theater that's really around locally. There are other theaters, but they're kind of more spread out. So we're gonna have a show where we're gonna talk about what it's like to run a theater in this day and age, and like how the market is, and how do you compete with people streaming, and all the streaming platforms and all of the options that are at people's fingertips now through their phones or whatnot. So it should be an interesting discussion, and plus the other thing was that they were facing some pretty tough times, or they almost closed as a movie theater. But things have, like, I think, turned quite a bit for them in the positive, and they're doing pretty well. So we're going to do a show on Saturday where we're going to just talk about, some specific things around that, but then as a whole, how movies are, movies are generally viewed, the industry where it might go, and in the face of, and how movies and also filmmakers try to navigate in this digital age. So it should be really interesting. I'm actually really excited. So stay tuned for that. That's going to be coming up in a few days. And then on Saturday also, we're going to be doing a quantum show with Method for Madness at the Gypsy Rose Tavern in Camden, Maine. And I'm really excited about the show. It's going to be like basically an electronic music dance party. We're trying to build it as like a dance party. So, and it's going to be both of our bands playing, and we're going to be doing all original stuff, and try to keep it dancey and get people moving. If and hopefully some folks show up. But if you're in the Camden area, showtime is at 9. So please come by, check it out. I think it will be a fun time. So this is Jason Dean signing off for today. Thanks again, everyone, for their love and support, and we'll see you next time. Peace.